I'm Ted Berg for SNY.TV, and this is Know Your Enemy, presented by Pepsi Max. The Yankees begin another chapter of the rivalry against the Red Sox this weekend, so joining us today is Marc Normandin from OverTheMonster.com. Marc, how are you?
You know Your Enemy just makes it sound like we're just butting heads so much right now.
It's true. We wish we could afford the rights to the Rage Against the Machine song for the background music, but that is beyond our budget. Marc, let's talk about a good thing for the Red Sox. And I know it's probably old hat to Red Sox fans, but David Ortiz has been so good again. This is a guy who a few years ago looked like he was toast, and now he's hitting like he was when he was a perennial MVP candidate.
You say that like it's tiresome for me to just talk about how good David Ortiz is.
Well, talk about how good David Ortiz is then.
Well, a couple of years ago, in 2008, he broke his wrist. And he came back and seemed like he was okay with it, but in 2009 it seemed like there was a little more trouble. His swing was a little slower. He developed kind of a hitch in his swing. He was swinging at things uncharacteristically, out of the strike zone. Was having no success pulling the ball, which just to even think about, especially with the way he's been. Imagine a David Ortiz that can't pull with authority.
Right, that's not David Ortiz at all.
Yeah, so it seemed like, he's kind of on the way out because there were just 2 months of awful struggles. And then he turned it on and he hit 28 homers from June to the end of the season. So it's like, okay, well, David Ortiz is back. Mm-hmm. And then in 2010, he had another terrible April. So you started to kind of go, okay, is this just going to be how things are going to be for Ortiz, from here on out? And he rebounded pretty much the same way. Last year, though, he started hitting to all fields better. He was able to pull the ball with authority again. He was much more like the patient Ortiz of old, who was kind of waiting for his pitch to kill, and he wasn't swinging at things that he couldn't really do anything with. And this year, it's pretty much been that, but even better.
Yeah, it's pretty awesome. It's good for him, too. The flip side of things for the Red Sox, Dustin Pedroia going on the disabled list, hadn't been having a great season in the first place. What are they going to do in his absence?
I'm just trying to figure this out before I came on to talk about this. They just called up Pedro Siriacho, which is not an answer.
Okay.
But, there's not really much they can do. They can play Nick Punto there, and that's actually fine. Punto's having a tough season, but that's probably a fine alternative. He's a really good defensive player. He gets on base. He doesn't have Pedroia's power, obviously. But his bat had actually been heating up when he was filling in for Pedroia initially, the first time that he had a problem with his thumb. So that's, it's not a bad alternative, all things considered. Since they're also missing Will Middlebrooks, mm-hmm. things are a little kind of iffy because Punto might be needed at third, which means Siriacho might be needed at second.
Let's talk about the pitchers in this series, Marc. Josh Beckett, who's going tonight, hasn't had his best season, but he's been pretty good lately.
Yeah, he had kind of a little interruption there when he had shoulder inflammation at the Red Sox. Basically, Beckett said he didn't need to go on the DL, and the Red Sox were like, okay, yeah, we're not going to we're not going to risk anything with your shoulder. But he had been throwing fine. You would have no idea that anything was wrong with him. His strikeouts have been down this year, but he has his normal strikeout-to-walk ratio, so he's not giving anyone anything that they can kill just because he's not striking guys out. He's been pitching to contact a little better than he has in the past, and he's been a mostly effective season except for a few stinkers.
Let's talk about tomorrow's starter. One of tomorrow's starters, Franklin Morales, has been really one of the Red Sox best pitchers this year.
In June. It's kind of sad that I can recite this off the top of my head, but this is how excited the idea of Franklin Morales starting is for me right now. He threw 25 and a third innings, struck out 31, walked only 3, which is insane for a guy who was basically given up on by the Rockies because he couldn't find the strike zone.
Yeah, you wonder sometimes if a guy coming back to normal elevation benefits psychologically from that and doesn't have to nibble as much.
There's that, and there's also the real effect of having the normal altitude on his pitches. This is a guy who's got a fastball with a ton of movement on it. It's a fastball that sits in the mid-90s consistently. It gets a lot of swings and misses for a heater, and he's also got a curveball that's just an absolutely sick pitch. And he couldn't get the same kind of break in it in Colorado that he could. Plus, throw in the whole young 20s left-hander with crazy velocity. Those guys don't just show up in the majors as finished products. They take some time, and sometimes they figure it out, and sometimes they turn into Jonathan Sanchez.
The other starter on Saturday, Felix Doubront, having a little bit of a rough go of it lately, but he's got good peripherals for the season.
Dubront's main thing has been that he's been able to strike out a ton of hitters, and it has brought his pitch count up a bit, so he's only been good for about 6 innings each time out. But he's mostly been pretty effective for the season. Lately, he's been giving up some homers. He looks like a guy, in the middle of his first full season. He's never thrown more than 129 innings in a year, even in the minors. So, you're hitting the halfway point of the year. He's been on this consistent schedule starting, and he's starting to tire a little. So he might be a guy where the All-Star break will be a good thing for him, even if it's just allowing him to skip, one start worth of time.
Mark, I got to let you go, but before we do, Sunday starter John Lester, obviously a guy the Yankees have seen plenty of times. His strikeout rate has been a little bit down this year. He's also walked fewer guys. Is there any issue of concern there, or is that just him sort of adjusting as he matures?
Before he started the stretch recently, where his walks have been down and his strikeouts are coming back up a bit, he'd gone about 100 innings dating back to last July, where his walk rates were way up and his strikeouts were down. And this seems to be a correction for that. So he's kind of changed something in his style, probably because his curveball just hasn't been as good and his cutter hasn't been as good as it used to be in the past. I don't know if the strikeouts are going to consistently come back, because he's also been a lot more hittable as of late. So, there's a chance here where he throws a gem against a lefty-heavy Yankees lineup, but there's also a chance that he gets beat pretty hard.
Mark, thanks so much.
Thank you.
Remember, for all the latest Yankee coverage, be sure to check in at itsaboutthemoney.net and chat with other Yankee fans throughout the series at nyyfans.com.